every student in every school by 2014 at 100%, which is obviously impossible. We have schools that have been the top 1 percentile in the nation. As of 2014, they will be failing schools. And maybe they should be comparatively to the world, but in that sense, it's a very hard target to meet at 100% level. So that will obviously go away and be revamped as well. The way that this particular act was designed is that within the first 2 years, if you miss your adequate yearly progress within 2 years, if somebody can give me a 5-minute sign so I know when to wrap up as well, I don't want to go over my time. Within the first 2 years, if we miss adequate yearly progress, you are now punitively given dollars, saying you have to spend these dollars on tutoring or transferring your students. Those are the two choices you have pretend you are a principal. Put yourself in a principal's shoes. The government has now told the principal and the superintendent, if you fail for 2 years, you have to take your students and put them somewhere else in a different passing school, or you have to offer these wonderful tutors that we're giving you. And here's a list of 500 of them that you have to pick from. Now that itself creates a management chaos for the principals and the districts. So that's something else that we needed to manage as well. Now, furthermore, if you continue to fail, Mr. Principal and Mr. Superintendent, we will fire your teachers without asking you. We will change your management structure without telling you. And oh, if you continue to do that, the last measure is we will close down your school. So this is why the No Child Left Behind was not very popular with schools and teachers and students, specifically teachers and administrators, because all it was punitive, punitive, punitive. You have to make advancements, or we will take away this, we will take away this, we will take away this. There was no incentive model built in as well. 2001 was when this was enacted. By 2004, the number of SES providers had increased from 20 to almost about 400 nationwide. And this is in every single state. The way that the SES providers work is that they must apply within every state. So for Brilliance Academy, we have to actually have an application in every single state to make sure that we can provide services in that state. So keeping this diagram in mind, what I want to do is talk a little bit about the words that are within the No Child Left Behind, which is school improvement. And we kind of talked about the school improvement strategy based on the AYP, which is the adequate yearly progress. Now, as I mentioned, the AYP is a ridiculous mark that has been set by politicians and arbitrators. And this is something that will most definitely be looked at. 2014 is a sunset clause for the No Child Left Behind Act. What that means is that everything is invalid at that point. The reason they chose 2001 to 2014 is because that gives you a 13-year benchmark of testing a student when they enter kindergarten and when they graduate high school. So that was the basis behind the 13-year mark. So now that that 13-year mark is coming up, as in government every year with budgets, it's interimly progressed or interimly passed. So every year we've been going through an interim budget of $2 billion that gets passed and passed and passed. So depending on what happens with the next election, we'll have a whole different situation to talk about, depending on if it's the Republicans or the Democrats that come into place. We talked a little bit about the definition of SES as well, as far as the supplemental educational service being tutoring, remediation, and other educational intervention. Now, the one big thing with SES is that it has an eligibility clause. So only, first of all, it must occur outside the regular school day, and it must be, quality and research-based. But who decides that quality and research, right? Is it an NTA position, which is the National Tutoring Association, to say that you are a certified tutor and you can now tutor these students? Is there a certification body? In fact, there is none. It's pretty much you certifying yourself and saying, I'm approved. Saying, I have the pedagogy, you have to approve me. So it's a very self-serving approach at that. One of the things that I want you to kind of look at is this pyramid of customers. When we mentioned that we have multiple customers within SES, for an SES provider, a tutoring provider in the States who works with the government, you have the provider at the top, you've got parents that you have to report to, you've got schools that you have to report to, there's districts that you have to report to on top of that. Then the state asks for additional reporting. And then finally, the federal government asks for additional reporting on top of that. So if you can imagine what this does to your profit margin from a private standpoint, much less, educators being not as savvy on the administration standpoint, to be able to administer 6 different levels of reporting and then be able to do that is a very tough thing to do. Now, as I was starting to mention about the eligibility of students, one of the things that SES has done is that it has allowed the eligibility of SES and supplementary education service and tutoring to come to low-income students. One of the clauses of the No Child Left Behind is that you must be qualified for Title I funds. Title I in the United States basically means that you meet a certain level of income requirement, which I think is about $18,000 or $24,000 for a couple. So if you make less than $24,000 a year annually as a couple, your children are not qualified for this. Now, unfortunately, the schools that we work in, about 95% of the students that go to that school are qualified and they belong under this threshold. So, it's not necessarily the poverty line, but it's a line for the Title I initiatives. And we go to, so this basically brings you almost about 40% of districts within the United States can participate in this. So, the Beverly Hills and all these will not participate in these types of tutoring acts, but certainly the urban schools, New York, Chicago, LA Unified, so on and so forth, will definitely participate in this as well. Other expansions of tutoring. Now that we've talked about SES and NCLB, and I'll take some questions at the end as well, I'm sure there's quite a few questions lingering in your minds. Other approaches that people have done in the States, which might be useful to us here, is the library and county approach. So there's a gentleman by the name of George Segal. I'm not sure, Mohan, if you know George or not. George actually started up a company called Tutor.com, and he goes through the ALA, which is the American Library Association, and the libraries, and he's contracted with not the schools and the federal government, but with the libraries and the counties, where he offers tutoring through the county and homework help via online through the county as well. So that's another approach that's been quite successful for George Segal as well. Other online approaches, as we mentioned, as you know, Tutor Vista was recently bought out, which was an Indian-based online tutoring company, was recently bought out by Pearson. And now they operate under that umbrella. That's how profitable it is, only because of the amount of educated resources available in the subcontinent of India and Pakistan and in Central Asia as well that can do these types of activities. And technology being as it is today, they can easily Skype and chat and do everything as well. I'm not sure if anybody's heard about the Khan Academies as well. The Khan Academy was just one gentleman trying to tutor his or her nephew, I forget who it was, or niece. And he did it online via a whiteboard solution, recorded it, put it up on YouTube, or put it up on somewhere that was a social media network. It took off like crazy, and now he's doing it just for fun. So, that's all it really takes is a good tutor with good pedagogical skills, and your business, your product will take off. Just this morning, the one English channel that we get upstairs that I was watching was about Steve Jobs, and they were actually doing a documentary on him, or a story of a documentary. And they mentioned that he went after the product, and the profits came behind. And that's absolutely something that we all, as tutors, should look at as well. The last thing I wanted to mention was the economic impact in the States and worldwide, I think, as opposed to face-to-face tutoring with online tutoring. Obviously, online tutoring is much cheaper because of the overhead costs and everything else. There's something to be said about the validity and the quality of teaching in that manner. I'm not saying that it can't be done. I've seen it done. In fact, we do it as well in some cases. But there's a lot more peripheral supplemental work that needs to go with a online model than it does with the face-to-face model. As we know, communication is almost 85% body language. Very hard to read body language online, right? So that's something we have to be careful about as well. The last slide I have is about the future of tutoring and SES, and want to talk a little bit about how the future of NTA plays into this as well. The No Child Left Behind, as we've mentioned, it is coming up to a head in 2014. Most states at this point have been granted the ability to request a waiver from SES and from NCLB. So they can simply send a waiver and say to the federal government, please remove me from any punitive damages for SES and for NCLB. And they simply say, okay, fine, no problem. That's it. So far, Illinois has applied for one, which is my basis. There's about 17 states that have applied for this. I don't remember off the top of my head, but I know Tennessee, California. I know Texas is not applying. Texas is one of the ones that it's going to spend it out, only because Texas actually, from an educational standpoint, if you don't know, Texas is operated by a private consulting company. Their entire educational model is called a TEA, which is a Texas Education Association, which is a for-profit entity that is outsourced, that has received the outsourced contract from the federal government, from the state government to manage their entity. So they're actually benefiting from SES because they make more money off of it, and that's why they want to keep it. But for the most part, we can see most states going away from NCLB and going on. To that effect, I'm very glad I sold my business about a year and a half ago. Private tutoring that we mentioned as well. The economic impact and the online boom. This is something that we all need to be very cognizant of. Is we have to make sure that we account for different talents in different places in the world. Why not take advantage of the smart guy who's sitting behind a computer in India if we can do it the right way? If we can make sure we provide all the face-to-face peripherals that are needed with it, right? So we offer classes via Skype, so that you can actually see the person. There's so many different technologies these days that we can take a use of and make sure we do that. Now, the last thing that I did not put on here, which I'd like to talk about as well, I'm not sure if we're going to share these presentations, but feel free to. There's some resources in here that might come in handy for your research and for everything else as well. But the last thing I want to share before we open up the Q&A, I'm not sure what the agenda allows for, is that the future of NTA. National Tutoring Association, like I said, has been around for 17, 18 years now. We grew from just offering certification at the college level to now having 15,000 people certified in how to become a good tutor. We also have an online model that you can actually go online, but it's paired up with an actual tutor master who you're reporting to. So it's not an online where you can just go and take class online and do it yourself. You actually submit essays and papers and get feedback from an actual NTA representative as well. Yes, it is quite cumbersome, but it keeps the integrity of the process at the high level until we can figure out a more innovative concept of doing that. As far as NTA is concerned and going forward into the next millennium and then being a part of the European Union as well, is we're very proud of Mohan and what he's been able to do in Australia. We look forward to helping anyone else that wants to take some of our charters and some of our missions and be able to apply that globally as well. So I'd like to open up the floor for any questions at this time, if we can answer any of those. Thank you.
Καλή σας μέρα. Λέγομαι Κώστας Πετρόπουλος, είμαι πρόεδρος της Ομοσπονδίας Φροντιστών Ελλάδος. Θα ήθελα να σας ευχαριστήσω για το μακρινό σας ταξίδι και για τη συμμετοχή σας. Άκουσα με μεγάλο ενδιαφέρον αυτά που μας είπατε, μόνο που στη δική μας προσέγγιση την εκπαιδευτική των φροντιστηρίων, θα ήθελα να μας εξηγήσετε, αν γίνεται περισσότερο, το λόγο για τον οποίο οι μαθητές προσέρχονται στα δικά σας φροντιστήρια, το είδος των μαθημάτων που διδάσκεται και ο σκοπός για τον οποίο οι μαθητές διδάσκονται τα μαθήματα αυτά. Για να κάνουμε και μία σύγκριση με τα δικά μας φροντιστήρια, όπου κατά κανόνα η προέλευση των μαθητών μας είναι δύο ειδών. Είναι αυτοί που θέλουν να αντιμετωπίσουν το σχολείο με καλύτερη επιτυχία, αλλά και για να διεκδικήσουν μια καλύτερη θέση στην πανεπιστημιακή πραγματικότητα της χώρας. Σας ευχαριστώ πάρα πολύ.
Sure. Wonderful. Don't you love technology? It's great. That's a good question. The question was why, if I understand it correctly, is why people come to tutoring in the United States. And when you say yours, I'm not sure if you mean Brilliance Academy, my personal one, or NTA in general. So I'll answer both of them. For my particular institution, it's a mandated scenario by the government. So they're actually coming as a remediation, saying you failed in XYZ, curriculum, so you have to actually retake it, or we're going to help you get to the next level.